Let's get started. My name is Antonio Rosario. I'm a local 804 Teamster and elected co-chair of Teamsters for Democratic Union. Today's webinar is sponsored by UPS Teamsters United, which is a project of TDU. We are a network of Teamsters who inform and involve members to build strong union and enforce the contract. Today, we will be getting ready for your OJS and talking about how you can inform and protect other members. We'll be covering what to do before a ride, during your ride, after your ride, documenting your ride, taking action, and educating other drivers, as you can see on the agenda there. With the volume down, management is looking for every excuse to harass drivers, and I'm sure many of you have been through that, especially since we beat their ass in the contract campaign. The company wants payback. The company uses OJS rides to push us to work faster and to look for things they can use against us in the future. And we're trying to help you guys educate against that. You need to be ready, and you need to help other drivers be prepared. That's what this workshop is all about. Now, I want to hand it over to TDU organizer Willem Morris for the next part of the agenda. Willem, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Rosario. My name is Willem Morris. I'm an organizer for Teamsters for a Democratic Union. There's about 520 people on the call right now, but I bet I know at least 100 of you guys. For everyone else, welcome. It's great to have everyone here. As Rosario said, we're going to go over before, during, and after your ride to get us started. The first speaker today on what to do before your ride is Derek Redding, a shop steward out of Local 413. And Derek, what can members start doing right now on a day-to-day basis to prepare themselves for an OJS?
Thank you, Willem. One of the first things to do is I would say, go over the toolkit that TDU provides, go over the OJS checklist, become familiar with what is on there, because this is going to be very important when it comes to documenting before, during, and after a ride. The UPS driver daily logbook is something we all use, and it's needed. I can't say that enough. It's really needed to document everything. The other thing I would say is to deliver your route the same every day. Know the methods, because that's what they're looking for on OJS rides, to see if you are not performing the methods. I follow them the same every day. I deliver my route the same every day. So that way, when they are on truck with me, makes it easy. You don't have to think about it. You're not trying to remember, well, what was the method here? How should I be performing this? You know, and you make sure I square my shoulders, handrail, etc. I just had a safety ride this Friday, a couple days ago, and about 4 or 5 stops into it, my supervisor said, "Wow, you're going to make this really hard for me." And I questioned him on what he meant, and he wasn't looking for a fight. He told me, "You know the methods. You know them well. I can tell." And that kind of takes away that attack if it had been an OJS ride. Another steward in my center is Isaac Gobble, and in our building in Columbus, we're very aggressive on contract enforcement, and management knows that. And we're 3 to 4 hours over allow every day. And management would love to use that against us, but we're consistent. We deliver the route the same every day. I work the same every day, supervised, unsupervised, and that's really good to do when you're preparing for an OJS, because it's something that they're looking for, being consistent and documenting it. I mentioned the logbook. It's great to have. It's great to be able to document what your route looks like on a normal day, and then to be able to document during the ride, because we all know that they will do whatever they can to try to speed you up, which includes lightening your dispatch, removing bulk stops, manicuring your load. The logbook helps tremendously with every OJS ride I've had.
Great. Thanks, Derek. And under the new contract, there's language in Article 37, Section 3, that states that management must give 24-hour notice to drivers before one of these rides. How can drivers take advantage of this language, and what should drivers be doing in this 24 hours before their ride?
That's a good question. Enforce it. It's in there. They're not going to bring it up. They're going to try to, tell you the morning of, I'm jumping on truck with you, and that's your chance to say no. There's new language. Get your union steward and shut the ride down. They need to give you at least a 24-hour notice, and they also need to tell you what the ride is. They need to state: is it a safety ride? Is it an OJS ride? Those are two different types of rides. I would also say, meet with your steward. Let your steward know that you have a ride upcoming. They can help walk you through some of the OJS checklists that we have and get you prepared. I would also talk to your preloader. Your preloader works, your truck is their work area. They know it maybe better than you do. They're going to be able to keep an eye out if management was the day of your ride inside your truck. They like to manicure your load. They like to make sure there's no misloads. Everything's in order because they are trying to speed you up. That is their sole purpose for that day, to speed you up and, like Rosario said, to find things to use against you. But I would say to make sure you enforce the 24-hour rule.
Great. And as Derek and I were talking about earlier, if this is your first time on the webinar hearing about the 24-hour language, there's definitely other drivers in your building that are hearing about it for the first time as well. So one of the first things we can do as attendees for this webinar is make sure everyone in our building knows about this language so we can enforce it. Thanks again, Derek. Next up, we're going to talk about best practices for during and after your ride. We have a business agent from Local 804, Mark Cohen. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, good morning to some, good afternoon to others. I'm going to just kind of reiterate some of the things because I think that the theme here is very similar and what Derek had said earlier. The two most important things I think when you're going to be OJS is consistency and documentation. We don't want to go out there and change how we do things on an OJS. The company knows this. The company spends over $1 billion a year on technology. So if we're going to try to reinvent things while we're on an OJS, they're going to know about it. They're going to try to say that you're sabotaging the OJS or you're delaying it or whatever the case may be. Don't do that. Fair day's work for a fair day's pay. Go up there, follow the methods. If you follow the methods, it's going to naturally slow you down. That's the bottom line. On a ride, company doesn't want you to follow the methods. That's how I've seen it on our local. I've been out there where I've OJS the OJSers. I followed managers, supervisors while they're doing OJSs, and I see all these things that they're not correcting on an OJS that their employees are not doing. If you're going out and you're releasing a package, the method is it's out of sight, out of weather. They're not saying anything or correcting the driver when it's, the driver's leaving it right in front of full view of anybody driving by out in the weather, and they're just leaving it at the front door. That's not the method. Why are they not correcting it? Because it's making the person go faster. For that particular day, they're getting better numbers. And that's what they're trying to do. Their sole intention is they say their purpose is to check your methods, but their intent is to get you to move faster and work faster because that's what they want to do. They do that in a bunch of different ways. They talk to you, they get you relaxed. They ask you, when they get on the truck, the first thing they ask you is, oh, how long you been on this route? All these things like that. They compliment you. They want to know, they ask you these questions because they want to put you in a relaxed frame of mind. They want to think that, they want you to think that they're your friends and you're going to work a little better. Just people need to understand what their intentions and what their motives are. there's some things that they also tell you to do, which they shouldn't be telling you to do. The whole intent is for them to sit there and observe your methods. If you're not doing the methods, then they're supposed to correct those methods. But them on the truck telling you, hurry up, pick up the pace, them telling you to overload your hand truck, them telling you to violate the methods and procedures. And let me just touch on that real quick. If they tell you to do something, you follow instructions, even if it goes against the delivery methods and procedures. You follow instructions. But everything that they tell you to do that you feel that they shouldn't be telling you to do, or any changes to your route, need to be documented. Those are the things that are going to protect you later on. Be respectful at all times. If they tell you to release incorrectly, if they tell you don't leave delivery notices, if they tell you leave packages in lobby of buildings when you're supposed to actually go up and deliver them to each apartment, you question them about it, saying, hey, this is not how I was trained, or this is not the method. If they tell you to do it, you follow instructions, but you document it, you bring it up to your steward, and you need to keep in contact with your stewards on all these rides. There's a ton of things. Supervisors are sent to schools just like anybody else on how to OJS people. So they're giving all these different tactics on how to get more production out of people. So if they're doing things that you know that you're not supposed to be doing, just make sure you're documenting it. In regards to that, I know I don't want to take into someone else's talking points, but one second here. When I say document, or anybody else says document, don't wait for the next day to sit down and write down what's going on. When you have your lunch break, whatever time that is, document anything that happened prior to you taking lunch. When you finish your day, document at the end of your day. But when you go after you punch out, you walk into your car and you're sitting in your car, write things down. The longer you wait to document something, the more of a chance you have of forgetting it. And it's important that you remember these things. And you take that information, you talk to your steward about it, and every ride should be grieved. That's not going to stop the company from trying to hold you to a number, but it is going to help you later on when they're trying to discipline you, or even advance that discipline and take you to panel, or try to fire you. If you go into a disciplinary hearing and you have a grievance saying, hey, on the OJS, this supervisor told me to do this, this, and this, or assisted me in this ways, that ride is not valid. It's not a valid ride. And if they're going to try to hold you to that, then we have a strong argument of fighting against that. So it's important that you document. It's important that you know that they're out there to do what they're, just get more production out of you. Identify that, know what those things are, and then make sure you're in contact with your steward and you're documenting these things. If there's anything else that people have, because I know there's a lot of things that go on OJS that we're not all, whether it's me or Derek or anybody who comes after me are going to talk about. There's a lot of things. Please get in contact with TDU. There's a plethora of information that they have, and if they don't have answers, they can always reach out to either me. They can always, if anybody wants to speak to me, you can reach out to TDU and they can give you my contact information. I'm more than willing to help anybody or assist anybody with any questions that they have. But good luck to everybody, and have a good day. Thank you.
Hey, Mark, one quick question.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more? What do I need to do if I'm going to grieve my ride? What's the steps after my ride to file a grievance on this process?
So you should have that documentation, all the things that were done on a ride where you feel were not fair, right? And that's the intent of a ride. It's to give them a fair day's assessment of your work. So if they're not doing that, whether they're taking off stops, if they're assisting you, if they're like Derek said earlier, they take stop off of you, or they manicure your load, or they tell you where to go your next stop, or they help you, they assist you in any way, you document it, you put it on the grievance, or you put it on you list all those things and you attach that to the grievance, and make sure that that's done within the time frame of your contractual, whatever your contract says, of how long you have to file a grievance. But every day that you're on a ride, the following day or that night, you should be on the phone with your steward, letting them know what's going on.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark. Next up, we have Greg Kerwood. Greg is an elected member of the TDU steering committee at a local 25. Greg, Mark talked about documenting. Why is it important to document your rides, and what exactly are you looking for when you're taking notes on these rides?
Well, as Mark mentioned, it is very important that everybody document their rides, especially as it's going along. When management sits down with you, whether it's in a grievance hearing, as Mark said, or as some performance review or whatever, they're going to have their version of events, and you want to make sure that you have your version of events. Memories fade very quickly, especially if it's a stressful day. There's a lot of things going through your head. It can be very difficult to remember everything that happened and the order in which it happened. So writing things down, as Mark said, as quickly as possible will help you remember them. And when you're in those meetings, it adds credence to your argument. When you can pull out a piece of paper and say, this is what happened, and read it off your notes, there's less question as to whether you're remembering things accurately. Some of the things, again, some of this was mentioned prior, but I think we can reiterate these things because they're very important. There's three groups of things that you're looking for when you document. The first, as Mark said, is anything out of the ordinary. And I think Derek mentioned, you want to talk to your preloader, see if somebody's been in your truck in the morning, if they manicured your load, are all your PAL labels facing towards you when they're not usually that way? Did they remove bulk stops? Did they even change your preloader to somebody who they feel is going to do a neater job? Did they remove sections from your truck? Other things you want to pay attention to on the road. Did the traffic pattern change? Was there construction for the last 3 weeks and suddenly there's no construction? Is school out? Are they on vacation? Is it summer vacation? Do you usually have on-call pickups every day that suddenly aren't there? Have any of your regular pickups been removed from your board? Did you get assistance from other drivers? Did they have somebody meet you? And of course, misloads is a huge one. If you have misloads every day that you're normally required to run and deliver, and suddenly your misloads come up and they have someone come get those, that's a huge time saver to the company and something that doesn't happen every day, so it needs to be noted. The second group of things, as Mark mentioned again, is management assistance. They are not allowed to assist you in any way on your ride, and anything that they do needs to be noted by you. So if they're telling you which way to go, how to run the route, where to park your truck, if they're holding doors open, if they're helping you carry packages, if they're grabbing the customer's attention, as soon as you walk in the door, they're shouting to the customer to get their attention. And this is a big one that happens all the time, they're sorting while you're delivering. So if you go into a business and they say, I'll stay out here, and you come back and you notice that their packages have been rearranged from the way you had them, that's important to note. And also, if they're directing you to violate any of the methods, walk off, across the grass instead of on the sidewalk. If they're having you change locations of deliveries, if you usually leave something at the back porch every day, and they suddenly are telling you to just throw it on the front porch. As Mark said, you want to work as directed. You can even say, this is not what I usually do, but you do want to note everything they tell you to do that is different from what you normally do. And the third group of things you want to note, as Mark said, is any kind of harassment. If they're on your heels every day, following you, nonstop, right up against you, verbally telling you to go faster, pick up the pace, let's go, come on. If they're giving you sort of performance grades as you go, you're too slow, that was terrible, you spent too long doing this or that, it's just not corrections, but verbal harassment that you're not doing things up to par. And then if they're telling you when and where to take your breaks and your lunch, if you usually take your lunch at a certain time, at a certain location, that's within the contract rules, and they tell you, no, you're going to take it later, or no, you're going to take it over here, or we're going to go to this place, that would also qualify. And there's two other things. It's very important that everybody understand. You can't take these notes while you are working. You need to be on your break, on your lunch, prior to the shift or after your shift, but you want to do them as soon as possible while your memory is fresh. And the last part, Mark mentioned a grievance and a grievance hearing. It's important to note that the new contract now requires the company to meet with you, with a steward after your ride to go over your ride. And they have to provide you any documentation that they have for your ride. Now, I know management likes to tell you that this is to, review your performance and whether you're following the methods. As we know, management is allergic to the truth. The reality is they use this as a tool to harass people. There's no two ways about it. And so what we want to do is make sure that we make that as difficult for them as possible. If they want to OJS every driver in the building, we want to make sure that every driver is demanding that meeting, sitting down with their steward, going over everything that happened on the ride, that the company provides any documentation, so that you're making sure that they fill out all the forms they're supposed to fill out, they do all the reports, right? We want to make this as challenging and difficult for them as possible, so they can't just hop on cars and harass people all day and then have no consequences. So those are the things that people need to take note of and write down. And remember to keep your cool out there, follow the methods, and do what you normally do.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. So now that we've covered before, during, and after your ride, we're going to wrap things up with Derek Redding again out of Local 413. Derek, we've got 600 people here on this webinar. They've got this information. What are the next steps? What should be people doing to take the information from this webinar and put it into action this week at their building?
Yeah, as stewards and activists, I would say start talking, start passing out the toolkit, start passing out the OJS checklist, start the conversation. Like we've all said, rides are coming. Everyone's going to probably have one. You can start with parking lot meetings in Columbus, Ohio. They work great. We started small now. When we have a parking lot meeting, drivers come a half hour before their shift. We catch them walking in, coming out. We distribute items like this, like the toolkit, logbooks, OJS checklist. It helps. One thing that we also did, I've been a union steward for 2 years now. I was still just a rank and file activist, and along with the stewards at the time, we pulled together some money and we purchased the logbooks in bulk. We got a big, 50, 100. We ordered at once. We started to hand them out. That's something you could think about doing too. Like we said, they help tremendously protect yourself. That's what they're there for. The document. It's hard to remember how your route was 2 weeks ago, let alone a month ago. So I would start passing everything out, distribute everything, get everybody prepared and ready for these rides.
Derek, can you just take 1 second for people who haven't used these logbooks before? Where can you get them, and what kind of information are you documenting in these books?
You can get them from the TDU's website. It's laid out very nice. It'll start with what time you punched in, what time you left the building, how many air stops you had, your PM routine. It's got it all laid out there. Stop count, package volume, how many next day airs you had, how much pickup volume you had. It's all laid out in the way you would complete your day. It's very easy to fill out, and there's a space at the bottom of each page for each day to take notes. Like we were talking about earlier, that's where you can write down, your pickup that normally they ship out 15 envelopes. Well, they had 30 boxes that day, so that's good to take note. Like I said, it's laid out very simple, very easy to just document everything that you can use later to compare and contrast on the day of your ride.
Great. And so last thing, Derek, in Columbus, you guys have had TDU members acting as organizers and shop stewards for almost a decade now. And so it's a lot easier for you guys to do these kind of parking lot meetings and bigger events. What about someone who's a newer activist and they came to this webinar and they want to get involved? What are some easier ways to get started if your building isn't quite as organized yet?
Just start talking to the drivers around you. An example is we had a young driver, probably 2 years seniority driving now, who started a Discord. Discord is like I don't know if everyone knows what Discord is, but you can get on there, you can talk, you can share pictures, have text groups in there. And he started that at our building, and it's a place to have private conversations just between the drivers. And it's helpful. It's somewhere where we can post things like this, like the checklist, the start time for the following week, who's on what route for the day, and it's really helpful. You know, people can start where you're at. Conversations with your loop mates, Discords, group text, phone calls, and it helps. It's a great way to quickly distribute information amongst other drivers, and it's a private space where you don't have to worry about management eavesdropping. And he started that a couple months ago, and it works great. There are tons of drivers where he can send you the link. You can join the Discord, and now someone that maybe wasn't very active or involved now is becoming more and more involved and active every day.
Great. Thanks so much, Derek. And just to kind of hammer home this point, there's 612 people on this webinar, but there's tens and thousands of drivers at UPS. But each of you works in a center with 100 other drivers. And so if each person reached out to the rest of their center, we would reach close to all of the drivers at UPS. When you come to these webinars, it's not just to be a passive consumer of the content. We want everyone to get involved, start organizing their buildings to get to the point where you are at a place like Columbus, Ohio. We'll go over this in just a second, but after each webinar, we text out the get involved form. We really want to reach out to each driver and help you get organized and start passing out this information. To wrap things up, though, we're going to finish with Antonio Rosario. Rosario, take it away.
Thank you, Willem. And wow, every time I hear these things, I always remember how important it is. Those supervisors, when they're out there on the road, they are trying to intimidate. They're trying to make you work faster, and all these things that you guys are hearing about, this will help you. Supervisors like to try to hold the doors open. I've had supervisors even try to hold the elevator door while I'm doing a delivery. These things should be documented because they should not be doing any of that. So we're gonna make sure that we open this up for a Q&A because we know lots of you have a lot of questions. Use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your question. If you look, you'll see it there. And just a few announcements. At the end of this webinar, we will text an email for a take action form and links to the OJS toolkit. We will also send you a link to order driver logbooks, which Derek mentioned how great they are and how officially written up they are, so you can make it easier for yourself. These webinars and this information is available because of TDU. TDU is a network of Teamster members working together to build union power from the bottom up. Join today. It's just $50 for the year, and you will get a free T-shirt when you join. Or you can join for a whole 3 years for just $100, and you'll get a free hoodie. They're very comfortable. I have a few. Lastly, I want to remind everyone to register for the IBT webinar with Sean O'Brien on the state of the UPS contract. This will be Sunday, March 3rd at 1 p.m. So please, everybody, look out for it, register for it. It will be good. Now we're going to have a little Q&A time. So Willem, if you don't mind, can you take it away for us?
Great. Thanks again, Rosario. We're going to have each of our panelists back up here. I've got a list of the great Q&As that people have submitted so far. Keep submitting them. We'll try to get as many as we can. The first question, and Derek, you touched on this a little bit. where can we find this OJS toolkit and the logbooks?
All of that is on TDU's website. You can, I think the link it might be on the home page.
Yep, homepage. Liana also just put it in the chat, and each of the drivers will be texted, or each of the people who attended this webinar will be texted this information afterwards. Okay. Next question is, can you be disciplined for a so-called bad OJS ride?
I'll take that one. The company could try to discipline you for anything they like. That's why we have a grievance procedure. However, the purpose of an OJS, as the company likes to is not for discipline. It's to correct and regard your methods and procedures. So I would argue that it's not a disciplinary ride. If they're supposed to be out there and there's something that you're doing wrong, their obligation on an OJS is to correct that behavior and tell you how they want you to do it. Now, if they tell you how they want you to do it and you continue to do it wrong, that's a different ballgame. But in general, the purpose of an OJS, according to the company, is to review your following of methods and procedures and make sure you're doing the job correctly. So to me, that's a pretty good argument that it shouldn't be a disciplinary situation.
Great, thanks, Greg. And for Derek, what is the difference in practice between a safety ride and an OJS ride?
During a safety ride, they are looking more towards the methods to make sure you are driving safe. They focus less on the speed and how you're performing the job. That's where they start to look for, are you using your handrail? You're squaring your shoulder, more safety method violations, or, make sure you're following them. On an OJS, like we've said throughout this webinar, they are trying to speed you up. They are trying to increase your stops per hour, and they will do anything to try to get that number up. I just had a safety ride. It was more relaxed. That's where he pointed out, wow, you're really good at the methods. This is going to be hard for me. And then the last OJS I had, they weren't worried about how safe I was being. It was more focused on how can I do the job quicker. So I think that's probably, I would say, the main difference. Safety ride, they're really looking to see if they can find you not being safe and not following the methods. And on the OJS ride, they are just trying to see ways to speed you up or to claim that you are trying to sabotage your day and slow down other ways than just following the methods.
Yep. As Mark mentioned earlier, sometimes they'll give you a safety ride and then give you an OJS ride and directly contradict things they told you to do on the safety ride. Can you also touch on the difference between an OJS and a virtual OJS?
The virtual OJS, they just kind of use their telematics and they have a way to watch you on the computer. I don't know if Rosario or Kerwood will want to touch on that. It's not the same as an actual OJS. On an OJS, they are physically with you and they're watching you. They are documenting as much as we are documenting.
I'll jump in real quick. Absolutely. The one thing that you have to know about the virtual OJS is that they are looking for your mistakes through, like what Derek mentioned, telematics. They are looking to see if your bulkhead door is open. They're looking to see if you're using your seatbelt regularly. Anything that you do that they see in telematics is what's going to make them go out there and watch you. So you may not get in trouble because as far as the contract goes, they can't do anything with technology, but what it does is they see your habits and then they start to follow you and then they actually see you do them. So it's very important, as Mark said and everybody else said earlier, you're consistent by using your methods all the time, and you shouldn't have an issue.
If I could add something to that, Willem, we haven't really touched on this, but when it comes to this virtual stuff and the company going through records and things, your delivery records are vitally important. whatever you put in that dyad is a delivery record, and you need to be accurate about it and do it correctly. I've seen thousands of delivery records where people are, put doc for the person's name, or only getting first names, or sheeting commercial stops as residential stops, or vice versa. Sheeting businesses that are closed is not in. All these ways that sometimes members do on their own, sometimes they're directed to by management. But those delivery records are a quick and easy way for the company to pull a report and find things that you are doing that can put you in harm's way. So you have to make sure that everything you put in that dyad is 100% accurate and as it should be.
Great. Thanks, Greg. And so for Derek, what should you do if you're instructed during an OJS ride to violate company policy or procedures in order to make us deliver faster?
Work now, grieve later is what should be done. But during a ride, if they're telling you to do something that you don't normally do, you can tell them, no, you're here to watch a fair day's work, and that's what I'm gonna do. I think there's a difference between you should park here, why don't you go here, things like that, in an actual instruction. If they instruct you, you should follow it. If they're telling you to do something unsafe, then I don't think you have to follow it. But when it comes to the delivery methods or your routine, it's okay to tell them, no, I don't, my customer likes for me to go around back. If they're telling you to park out front, you can say no, tell them, hey, I'm going to perform my job like I do every day. And if they do instruct you, you work now, and then we grieve through the grievance process.
But just to be clear on this, Derek, if my manager tells me, hey, you should park here, say I don't usually park there, are you instructing me to park here? And if he says
Correct.
yes, then you
Then you do,
obey.
and you obey, you grieve, and you document. That is a great scenario to make sure you have written down, detailed in your notes, that you asked, are you instructing me? They said yes. Well, perfect. I'll follow your instruction, but it'll also help prove that you are speeding me up.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. And just a quick follow-up on this. Another person asked, if management instructs to go against the methods, should we continue to go against those methods even after the OJS is over? Greg, what's the answer to that?
That is what should be brought up in the meeting that you're required to have. If the company, and I've seen them do it, if they want to stand by their, we run the show and we're telling you what to do, you want the commitment from them in front of your steward as a witness that they're directing you to violate the methods. Because things change, and 6 months later you have a different supervisor who may want to discipline you for that procedure. So at the end of the day, you work as instructed, and you grieve. And to be clear, it's a fine line. You have a right to voice your displeasure or disagree or explain what you usually do, but you cannot refuse to work as directed unless it's a safety issue. I know someone brought this up earlier in one of the questions. If they're telling you to do something that is unsafe, work as instructed does not apply in that scenario. You can inform your supervisor, you are asking me to do something unsafe, and I am not willing to do that. I know someone brought that up. Safety comes first, and I think all of us who've been in these hearings will go to the mat 100% over any issue like that.
Great, thanks, guys. Quick one for Greg. When we say document, it's not just note-taking, it's for grievances, correct?
It's a written down memory of what happened during the day, whatever purpose you need it for, whether it's in the meeting afterwards or it's to write up a statement towards a grievance, or whatever purpose it serves. And things like that can happen down the line. I think Mark mentioned, if they're having a performance review with you 6 months later, they're trying to discipline you for something. You want to have those notes so you can say, because they'll bring up the OJS. Well, you did such and such on your OJS, and you want to pull out your notes and say, well, here's all the problems with my OJS. Hopefully you've already discussed in the meeting and in a grievance hearing, but even if not, you have those notes. It's very difficult for them to argue with what you have written down that's dated and has, all the information on it. If you stand there and say, well, that's not how I remember it, I think it was this, that leaves a giant loophole for them to argue through. So everything you have written down and notated is for any purpose that you need it for.
Thanks, Greg. Question for Rosario. What about if the preload supervisor is in the back of my truck manicuring my load before the ride?
Well, again, make sure you document it. A lot of times they will manicure your load. For those that don't know what we mean when we say manicuring, it's when the supervisor goes in there and puts everything in perfect order. So when you're out on the ride, everything just happens to be miraculously where you need it to be. A lot of times they try to do this, and you make sure you document that. As long as the documentation and everybody's aware of that in the meeting, it's like at the meeting that we talk about having afterwards, then you should be fine. But make sure you document that. It's very important. And make sure you ask him his name. Excuse me, what's your name, sir? And if he doesn't have his name or doesn't want to give it to you, then you could put in a grievance for them not wearing their tags. So there's plenty of ways to combat that.
Thanks, Rosario. And question for Derek. If the contract states it's a fair day's work for fair day's pay, why are drivers receiving discipline for not meeting SPOR? This has been happening in my center. What can we do about it?
You said for not meeting your SPOR, like a demonstrated SPOR? What was the question again? Say the beginning part.
It just says, the whole question is, if a contract states there's a fair day's work for fair day pay, why are drivers receiving discipline for not meeting SPOR? This has been happening in my center. What can I do about it?
I would say we keep saying documentation, but that's why doing the job the same every day is going to help protect yourself against that. You don't need to, if you have an average of a 15 SPOR on your ride, it doesn't mean you have to do 15. There's a little leeway, and especially if you can prove that your load was manicured, the day was set up better, and it increased. That's where all the documentation comes to show and to prove that. You have to prove that a fair day's work it has to be the same type of work if they're going to try to compare different days.
Another thing as well, and David Levine, I just put this in the chat. You can contact TDU if this is happening in your building, and we can discuss this in more detail with you and help you with your grievance. That's what we're here for as organizers. Fill out the feedback form, put that in your responses, and someone will get in touch with you this week. Greg, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add, as I said earlier, sometimes we get hung up on this, what the company is doing. They can discipline you for anything, right? That's what we have a grievance procedure for, and that's what the hearings are for, and that's what your business agent and your steward are there for. If they want to give you a warning letter for not wearing purple shoes, they can give you a warning letter for not wearing, we can't prevent them from giving you the actual discipline. But what we can do and what we will do is fight that discipline. There's no numbers in our contract. There's no performance in our contract. There's no SPOR. We don't recognize any of that garbage. So if they want to discipline you for that, there's nothing we can do to stop them from handing you a warning letter and saying, we're disciplining you for that. But the grievance should be filed. The hearing should happen. The argument should be made. And that warning letter should be rescinded. And that's the process that happens afterwards.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Quick plug for a second. Someone has been mentioning, you keep mentioning methods. Is there a way we can find these? TDU put out a series of toolkits this year. The toolkit is just some flyers or handbills or textable graphics that explain separate things. We have one that will be texted to you about how to prepare for OJS. And we did one earlier this year on hunting season and how to avoid discipline. So there's a toolkit that we put out on the methods that can be found on the website, and someone can drop the link for that in the chat. Next question. If the management has a PCM and they tell the drivers that they're doing an OJS, is that valid, or do they have to tell individuals when the ride is going to be?
They have to tell the individual, and they have to give them at least 24 hours notice, and it has to be specific. They can't say everybody's getting a ride this month. They can't come to you as an individual and say, we're going to ride you sometime next week. That's not 24 hours notice that you're getting a ride at a certain time on a certain day. That is very important language. It was put in there for a reason, and it's absolutely vital that we hold them to that. And I've seen it happen. They'll come to somebody in the morning. Hey, I'm going to ride with you today. I know I didn't tell you, but can we just get this over with? Because don't fall for that nonsense. Make them follow the contract. As I said earlier, you don't want to make this process easy for them, because the easier you make it, the easier it is for them to do this to everybody, right? You want to use your ride as a tool to prevent the other rides and the other harassment. We all are on the same team here. And we want to make the on-road supervisor's life miserable. We want to make the center manager's life miserable. We want to make this as difficult for them as possible so that they start to loathe going on car with people, right? Follow your methods and make them work, because there's one thing we know about these folks. They're not interested in working, or they wouldn't have gone into management in the first place.
Thanks, Greg. Question for all of you. I think this is a relevant one for lots of new drivers. Do you have any tips for handling the pressure of having a supervisor on car so as not to outperform a normal day's work? I nearly ran scratch during an OJS. When I was 2 to 3 hours over allow later in the week, the steward had a difficult time reconciling the difference. I've been told to drink more water, drive to the restroom, use the hand cart, etc., but the pressure is real. What do you guys have for that?
I would just jump in real quick. First of all, as Greg mentioned and Mark mentioned earlier, the supervisor's job is to get you to work faster, and we understand that pressure. Going into the ride knowing this and making sure that you know this person is not your friend. They are not your friend. They will talk to you like they are. They will. I've had the situation where I actually pulled the truck over, and they said, "Well, why did you stop?" I said, "Because you're talking and you're distracting my driving. It's unsafe. So I prefer, if you have to speak to me, wait till I park the vehicle and do my deliveries." And from that point on, he knew what he was dealing with. It's very important you nip things in the bud right away. Definitely make sure that you drive carefully, you do the speed limit, you stop at every yellow light. These are all things, all the methods that they talk about. Counting 1, 2, 3 when the light turns green before you go, looking left, right, left. Every little thing you do, as long as you continue to follow the methods and work consistently in that form, making sure you use your lowering and lifting methods, everything that they teach you, you do every single thing by the book, you will be okay. But you have to do it that way. I'm sure Greg could probably get a few more points in there as well.
Well, I will. You're 100% right, Tony. And I will say that if you came to me as a steward with that, it is difficult to reconcile. My guess is the pressure is real, and I certainly wouldn't want to diminish your feelings on car. We've all been there. But at the same time, there's probably a lot of methods that you're not following. And so the solution to that is to read the methods, know the methods. I know they seem boring and dull. I find them comically entertaining, frankly, as to what the company thinks that we're supposed to do out there. Management does not know the methods. I can promise you that. They don't know them. They don't teach them to supervisors. So if you know them and they don't, you have an advantage. And if you're following those methods, it's virtually impossible for you to follow the methods and do the job faster than you're doing it now.
Great. And just a reminder, if you're a more experienced steward on this webinar, you have younger drivers who have that exact question. As union leaders and activists, it's our responsibility to be proactive, to meet with our drivers and make it so it's a team responsibility for these OJS. If this is just a one-on-one battle, the company has the upper hand. They need to understand that if they're going to do these rides, they're messing with the whole union, not just one person. So we have so many great questions in the chat, but we're going to start wrapping things up. We have time for 2 more rapid fire questions. First question. If a supervisor asks me to release a package without signature required that needs a signature, what can I tell him? Come on, this is rapid fire. Let's go.
I'll take it. With a blatant method violation like that and a company policy violation like that, I would obviously tell them, you're asking me to violate the methods. Is that what you're telling me to do? You're asking me to falsify records. Is that what you're instructing me to do? Get a verbal commitment to them. And I would immediately contact my steward. I wouldn't even be above telling the supervisor, listen, I'm going to, send a text message to my steward right now because you're asking me to do something that can cost me my job. And I'm not comfortable with that, and put them on the spot, turn the tables. It wouldn't shock me that they would do this sort of thing. But I would want to make it abundantly clear to them that they're not going to put your job at risk without you putting their job at risk as well.
Perfect. Derek, a quick one for you. Are they allowed to question me while I'm driving? I find that so distracting.
I believe they can. I think, like Rosario said, that's on you to say, hey, I'm trying to focus. I'm trying to drive. There's nothing that stops them from trying to talk to you while you're driving. You just need to assert, you are distracting me. Build it around safety. I feel unsafe right now. You're distracting me. I'm not able to follow the safe driving methods right now. I feel like I'm going to miss something on the road. They can do it, but it's up to you to kind of voice very quickly, hey, this is distracting. I don't want to cause an accident or, do anything wrong. You're messing up by talking to me while I'm driving.
Great. Last question. Right now, they're using the camera analytics to harass drivers under supposed safety reasons. Under the new contract, aren't those cameras at least facing in supposed to be turned off? What can we do about this?
Yes, unless you're currently on your packet. And even then it's supposed to be used just to advise you. I think we have to start to realize the difference between harassment and, if they're just bringing this stuff up to you and there's no discipline involved and all that stuff, stop caring. We get a little bit wrapped up in, they're talking to me, they're saying this to me or whatever. If it isn't antagonistic and it isn't harassment, don't care. If you're not on the clock, walk away. If they want to talk to you about anything, demand your steward. Again, make it as difficult for them as possible. Far too many times, members, they come up to members and you feel this civility that you have an obligation to speak to these folks. You don't. If they want to ask you questions, grab a steward and then say, you know what, I'm not comfortable answering this out here. Can we go into an office somewhere? Make them work and make it difficult for them. And the next time they'll think twice before they come up to you. But it's similar to the discipline, unless it's out and out, insulting or harassment like that. You got to stop caring and you got to start turning the tables and making it difficult for them.
And so for me as an organizer, I've had a camera question come up quite a few times in the past few weeks. If you are being harassed or disciplined around the cameras, we have an article with details on the TDU website. Also, again, I'm going to plug the Take Action form. If you contact us with this question, we can help you with the specifics. We can help you file a grievance. We can help connect you to experienced stewards. That's what TDU is here for, is to help with these kinds of things. David Levine, staff director for TDU, is going to add one more thing to wrap us up. David, go ahead.
Hi, this has been a great webinar and great to see so much participation. I just have a quickie on cameras. I would urge people to check out the article on our website and the language in that in the contract article. It specifically says, like Greg said, there's no coaching of drivers so people should not be called into the office in any way or talked to about at all based on the sensors. The inward facing technology isn't a camera, it's a sensor, but it can detect what it thinks is distracted driving and things like that. In some places, people have reported being called into the office, even though they shouldn't be. In general, I totally agree with Greg not to worry so much about what management is worried about. But this is a place where they're testing this new language and trying to get away with coaching or harassment or talking to people about data from the sensors when they shouldn't be. Clearly, in the contract, they shouldn't even be having the conversation. I think we have to draw a firm line against it. We should be grieving it. We can help you grieve it with the correct language and make a pushback against it. And I see Greg nodding because he's like, yeah, let's do that. So thanks.
Great. Thank you, David. Again, to each person who attended, hopefully you were receiving some texts during this webinar with some links on follow-up form. We've had 3 of these contract enforcement webinars so far this year, and we're going to keep having more. One quick thing, last week's webinar was on soups working. There were lots of part-timers and insiders on this call. This is obviously more specific for drivers. We're going to be having issues for every single person at UPS this year. That's what TDU is for. Please follow up. Please be engaged. Don't just come to these webinars as a participant. Go and take action. Send the recording, send the links, send the toolkits out to people in your building. The union is stronger when more of us are informed, educated.